the Louise Hindle Lecture Hall. That's great. Me and Louise.
I don't think Louise will be joining us.
You never know. I might have some kind of, what do they call it? Seance power.
Okay, that'd be a little scary.
It would be.
Spiritual power.
All right, let's see. Oh, bless your heart. Thank you. Hi. Can you hook me up? Oh, forgive me, it's how I'm trying to use these days.
She doesn't have to confess to it.
Oh, good. And baseball. Okay. Actually, can I? Can you call them in? I think that might be the most stable. And, there. Okay. It's on. I'm on. Mr. Fonson,
Yes.
would you go back in the other room and see if our purses in there?
Which other room?
That where I was going to launch, so the registration room that was.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Because I just realized I didn't bring it in here.
Okay.
Hello.
No, maybe not.
Well, that's if the two.
This is, no? Okay, so I have to. I've got a USB. We could just switch it out here real quick. Might be better than. So I can. Do I have to worry about staying in one place because of recording, like for YouTube kind of thing?
No.
Okay. I'm just gonna show my PowerPoint, not me, right? One can always walk.
That's what that was for, that was for.
Yeah. It's not gonna see me.
It doesn't matter how far going versus
Okay. Okay, so I got this on my USB here, so we can move it to this computer and then I can use the remote. Is that right? Will that do it?
Yeah, right.
Oh, I see what you mean. I thought you meant that, okay, all right, miscommunication. That's okay. We'll just go with this. That's fine. Well, I was,
That wasn't in the room, that found it.
oh, thank you.
Send it,
Thank you.
sitting on that chair over there.
I just got one too many. That's okay. We'll just leave it with this. Yeah, that's fine. That's, yeah. I have a hat and I'm gonna wear my hat. That's okay. I was kind of dancing around. All right, 1 o'clock. Hi, I'm Barbara Glessner-Fines. I'm from the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Law. I see many, many familiar and well-loved faces here in the room. So thank you for coming to be here. And those of you who I don't know, I hope that we'll get to know in the next hour as we talk about all the mistakes that I have made in using technology in law teaching. I'd like to hope that the mistakes that I've made in using technology in law teaching are not unique to me. And I hope that for the benefit of us all, that you'd be willing to share some of the mistakes that you've learned from as well. We know that in learning from mistakes is the most powerful kind of learning that can happen. It's one of the things that makes Cali lessons such powerful tools for learning is because the students are required to make a choice and sometimes they get it wrong. And when they get it wrong and then are corrected, that learning goes very, very deeply. So these are lessons that I've learned really well because I learned them the really hard way. Now hopefully you can learn from my mistakes if you haven't made these mistakes. So I've got 9 innings of baseball here. 9 innings of bad baseball. My first inning of bad baseball was believing if you build it, they will come. So I've written a lot of Cali lessons and I put together beautiful, twin pages for my courses, or before twin was even developed, web pages for my courses. All kinds of lovely uses of technology for students to assist them in assessing their own progress, in exploring ideas further, and they don't use it. I build it, but they don't come. And what I learned, of course, was that it's not enough that it's there. It's not enough to tell the students that it's there. Students have to have a reason for using the technology, the technological tools that we provide for them to advance their learning. Because today, more than ever, students have to juggle all kinds of demands on their time, all kinds of demands on their attention, and they're going to make rational choices. So if you don't take the time, and I have found that that means taking the time in the classroom, in the hallway, in the office, face-to-face time, to tell students why it is worthwhile for them to use a Cali lesson or explore a website or engage in some legal research or whatever the tool might be, the chances are very good that very, very few, very small percentage of the students are actually going to use that technology. Now, in terms of motivation, the best motivation is, I don't think grades are the best motivation, because what grades will do is cause them to access the technology, figure out if it'll get them an edge, right? Learn only as much as they think will give them the edge, and then learn that only long enough for the final exam. And we just don't want that. We want our students to be learning for life, not just for the final exam. And so I have found that an even stronger motivation is for them to understand why it's important for them to know this. Not just, it'll be on the exam is a quick and dirty way, right? But for students to understand, if they were to have watched Bill Henderson's talk this morning and see how the world of legal practice is changing, how the skills and knowledge that they have to develop are dramatically and rapidly changing, and then see how the lessons that we're providing will advance their career. This will help you get an A on the exam? Yeah, that'll motivate students. But today, what I'm finding, this will help you get a job. Every ear in the room is listening better than I have ever heard them, seen them listen. And that requires some thought on our part about what the connection is between our lessons and their career. And so to provide that motivation means we need to think very carefully about why they should bother. It's a great challenge to our teaching. Okay, here's another inning of bad baseball from my legal education career, and that is presuming that lights in the stadium improve the game. I love technology. I'm a gadget girl. If it's a new one, I want to play with it. If it's clickers, sure, bring them on. If it's interactive technology, you bet, I want to use it. Video, for sure. You know, if there's something that's wired into the seats in the classroom that will improve their attention, I want to install it, even if maybe it's not such a good idea. And you know, Wrigley Field was the last baseball field to install lights, 1988. They fought it so hard. Did it improve the game? There you go. I don't know. You tell me. You know, why were we installing lights in Wrigley Field? I think we have to ask the same question about why we're using technology. And I know that this conference, for all 20 plus years that it's been going on, and in many, many sessions reiterates this lesson, but it seems like we have to learn it anew each time if we really like playing with the tools, and that is to be real thoughtful, real purposeful about the tools that we use. And in particular, in thinking about being purposeful in choosing our technology, again, that goes back to what is it we're trying to accomplish with the students? What do we want them to learn, and how is this tool, as opposed to the many other tools that are available, the best tool for improving their learning? I think we also have to be very aware of our law school's culture. So if our culture is like Chicago in 1988, and we're trying to put lights in our stadium, our students might be, on the one hand, very grateful because we're very progressive, but they also might be very distracted by the very novelty of it. On the other hand, if we are in a culture where there's lots of use of technology, I know what we're facing right now with our students at our law school is that every professor has their own version of course management software. And not just the commercial vendors, but their own web pages. So Twen and Lexis Blackboard and the university's Blackboard system and their own web sources and this and that. And the students say, please, can't you guys agree on one thing? We spend so much time trying to remember where we're supposed to go for this class as opposed to that class, and how we're supposed to, how is this helping our learning? And I think it's a legitimate question. How is it helping their learning? Are we being purposeful in our use of technology? And our culture is, you know, like most law school cultures, a group of independent contractors when it comes to what we do in the classroom and with our classes. And I think we need to kind of move that culture along if we're going to improve our use of technology. Finally, I think a lot of times we make the mistake of wanting our students' attention so badly. You know, this is the whole battle over laptops in the classroom, right? We want to engage them. We want their attention. Well, absolutely. In order for education to happen, the first step is attention. People cannot learn if they do not attend. But attending does not guarantee education. And so it's easy to fool ourselves that if the students are all paying attention and smiling and laughing and saying, wow, that was a great class, and giving us a slap on the back, that learning took place. When in fact, maybe very little learning took place at all. Or maybe the learning that took place was not the learning that we set out to take place. So again, it goes back to that being very thoughtful and purposeful in choosing what are we trying to accomplish and will this tool accomplish it. And have I shown videos just to keep the students happy? Yes, I have. Can videos be very, very powerful tools for learning? Yes, they can. But the lesson that I had to learn is that it's really hard to go from the video to the lesson. It's real easy to put the video in the class, get the students' attention, and hope that that's then engaged their learning. But to translate that into actual learning that you can see happen is a little bit harder, especially because videos, that's television land. Now, increasingly, maybe it isn't in the minds of our viewers. But I think that that's just goes back to that common mistake we make of thinking that if I teach it, they learn it. Here's another one of my mistakes. They don't need spring training. I've got a particular technology that I'm using, clickers. I'm going to use clickers. I beta tested clickers for our university a few semesters back. No problem. They're just like phones. They won't have any problem. They're all digital natives. Wrong. Just because they're digital natives doesn't mean they know every neighborhood in their home or how to navigate it. And you need to take the time, because if you don't, you're going to leave some students out and frustrated, and they will feel as though you did not respect them. And that will doom their learning. And so very, very important to teach the students how to use and navigate the technology. And that's especially so now we see as technology is so transforming the practice of law. One of our learning outcomes from law school has now, along with everything else that's getting pulled into the mix that we have to make sure they know how to do before they graduate, is we have to make sure that they know how to teach themselves how to use technology. So it's not just that we want to make the technology accessible for them so that they can use whatever teaching tool we've developed, but it's that in and of itself is a learning outcome. That in and of itself is something that's worthwhile for them to learn, is how to learn technology. And so if we're thoughtful about that, about helping them how to master new technology, we've added to their skill sets. Oh, this is the one I think I learned the hardest. I don't need a relief pitcher. This was one of the first lessons I learned in using technology years and years ago. The American Bar Association was considering amending the Model Rules of Professional Conduct to add a rule that said you can't have sex with a client. They asked me to speak at a combined ABA, Center for Professional Responsibility, and Association for Professional Responsibility lawyers meeting on this topic. And I thought, okay, I can do that in about 10 seconds. Duh. I couldn't see but it was very controversial. And I couldn't see for the life of me what the controversy was. And how are we going to have a conversation about this really controversial rule when some of us see it as so self-evident that there should be such a rule? And so what I decided I had to do was I had to enter into the world of those who oppose the rule and really understand their mindset, and then get some tool of conversation. So I hired some actors from our theater department and wrote a script about a young, overworked associate. Doesn't have any social life, you know, overbearing senior partner demanding that he have work on her desk that very next morning, trying to generate business, and a girl he knew in high school calls him, wants her to represent him. Well, I can't fit you into that. Well, I could meet you this evening. Great. I'll come to your place. Okay. Where is it? Well, I'm actually staying at the Embassy Suites right now. Well, come on down. We'll meet in the lobby. There they are in the lobby talking. Oh, I'm going to get a divorce, you know. I wish, you know, back in high school he seemed so nice and blah, blah, blah. And so she's telling the whole story of the breakdown of her marriage, and he's being very sympathetic, as a divorce lawyer should, you know, very supportive. And she's saying how much she liked him when they were in high school, and how she always looked up to him, and she knew that he would do a great job representing her. And then she starts crying and says, but I don't think that I can afford it. Now, when I showed this video to my students, at that point, all the men in the room went, yeah, here it goes. He, in turn, turns to her and says, he reaches out, pats her hand, and says, it's okay. We'll work something out. At which point, all the women in the room went, here we go. It was so obvious that the gendered reaction to what was being seen in that video was part of what underlied this whole discussion. So anyway, long story short, I came up with this wonderful, it was like 40 minutes. It was this little scene where they're talking, fade to black, and then it was the following two scenes of each of them talking to disciplinary counsel at the end of the divorce when their own relationship fell apart. I go to the ABA conference, have my little VHS tape, put it in, we're going to have this, it won't play. This is not one you can act out. Right? Because I'd like 2 volunteers from the audience right here. Now just kiss her lightly, right? No, we can't act it out. It's not one that, I mean, I can tell you about this and you can kind of get the picture, but you're not going to have the visceral reaction that was so important to us having a really good discussion of this issue by me describing the video. You had to see the video. Well, and the angels flew in and repaired the VHS, and within 5 minutes we were up and running. But I have never been so panicked in my entire life because I was very young and I was very vulnerable in this room full of 350 angry attorneys. And I had, you know, the vision of 40 minutes of trying to fill that time. Never walked into a classroom since then, or a presentation where I had a PowerPoint or a video or anything that I didn't have a plan for what I was going to do. If none of the technology broke, I always, even today when I'm walking into a classroom with a whiteboard, bring my own marker in case the markers are all dried out. Because I learned always have a backup plan. So if graphics are important, then you better make sure that you can deliver those graphics. If a video is important, you better have a couple of different routes of being able to deliver that video. Okay. One good pitch is all I need. Here's another one of my great hard-fought, hard-learned lessons. Once I've mastered a particular teaching technique or the particular use of a technology, I become very enamored of its power. And then I want to use it all the time. Now, I have to say that some of my colleagues have made this mistake to more egregious degrees than I have, because I have a pretty short attention span. So there isn't too much that I stick to for very long before I become a little bored and want to switch it up some. But boy, when PowerPoint came into the classroom, you know, faculty members who said, wow, this keeps the class organized, and this is so much better than writing on the board. I don't have to turn my back to my students. I am going to develop PowerPoint slideshows for every single class that I ever will teach for the remainder of my days. And if it doesn't have a PowerPoint, it can't be a class. And so we've all seen that mistake and probably made that mistake ourselves. But good teaching, one of the 7 principles of good practice in teaching and legal education is that good teaching respects diverse ways of knowing. And no matter how good a pitch it is, it may not be the most effective way of teaching every student in your class. So we have diverse learning goals. Our technology should match our learning goals. We have diverse students. So for any given learning goal, if it's important enough, we should be delivering instruction for that learning goal in more than one way. In the academic support community, years ago now, somebody at a conference, I wish I knew who so that I could give them credit, called it the magic of the third resource. A student will come to you and say, I don't understand this personal jurisdiction stuff. Can you give me some help? Yeah, here, examples and explanations, that's a nice little book. Why don't you read that, see? No, that's just more reading. It's just more, I need something that kind of simplifies it. Well, here, try this Cali lesson on personal jurisdiction. It'll take you through, give you some feedback, maybe that'll help. Well, it helped a little bit, but if I had just something, well, maybe a visual would help. Here's a flow chart on this. Oh, why didn't you give this to me in the first place, they say. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you gave it to them in the first place, they would have said, nah, it's the magic of the third resource. Danny Dunn and the homework machine. It's the process of working through it that gets them to that place of understanding. But that being said, there are students for whom the flowchart is going to click better than reading. There are students for whom an interactive exercise is going to work better than one that is more passive in its delivery of instruction. And so we can't presume that one good pitch is all we ever need. Sometimes I think that when it comes to our students' technological capabilities and equipment, that one size fits all. So if my website, YouTube, presentation, PowerPoint, document, or any other technological delivery works on my computer, then it works on all of their computers. Now, many people in this room know much, much better than I do about just how complex and difficult and demanding this problem is. And I can't solve it from my desktop. I cannot do that. I don't have that ability. And so what I have to be aware of, though, is the problem. I have to be aware that my technology that I might choose to use has certain demands that all of my students may not have the capabilities to use, may not have access to, that it may not work for their technology. Just the MacBook problem is enough, but now we've got phones and iPads, and pretty soon it'll be, because the hardwiring of their particular neural net, doesn't match the hardwiring of my neural net, which we know that would be true, because I just don't have a standard neural net, I'm sure. How do we solve that? I think one place to start is with really good communication with your students. So ask. Is that working? Can you get that? How many of you have this? How many of you have that? Can you open up this? Second is make sure you have good equivalents or alternatives. And so I've got this podcast that you can listen to, but if you can't have, your speaker is too cloudy or whatever, here's a transcript of it on reserve. Or, now some of them it's really hard. some technology, it's hard to have some kind of an alternative access. Sometimes it's just an alternative place. If your computer won't play this, I'm arranging to have this in the library. There are computers there, you can go there and you can watch it there, you can listen to it there. And so help that way. And the third ticket here is to get help from people who do understand this problem much better than you do. And choose technologies where this is less of a problem. You don't want your technology to be too new, because there are a whole lot of students in the class who can't afford the cutting edge technologies. But as my son was reminding me as we were discussing this presentation last night, you don't want it to be too old either, because many of them have moved on and will find all the old technology frustrating, and it'll undermine your credibility a little bit too. This is the mistake I most regret, I feel the worst about, and that's throwing players out of the game. Now, I've never done it intentionally, but I've unintentionally used technology in ways that certain students in my class simply could not participate in learning. For example, if there's someone in the room who has a blue-green color blindness, they can't read the letters on this page. Until I spent an entire class talking about the development of common law property and community property, and using a map in which the community property states were green and the common law property states were blue, and I had a student come up to me after class and said, "Can you show me that map in something other than blue and green, because I can't differentiate the colors?" At which point I knew that student had sat there for an hour, not just missing out on the visual learning, but feeling outcast by the visual learning, feeling disrespected, being thrown out of the game, unintentionally. But it shouldn't be that should happen, because in education, we can't say you can't play. If we let the students in the door, then we should be teaching them all. And if they require some accommodations, then that's what we should be providing. When it comes to technology, we should be aware of the ways in which our technological uses may not be accessible to all students. So for the last 2 years, for example, I've had a blind student in my class. Well, I'm a very visual learner. I use a lot of visual graphics, flow charts. Really taught me about how I might be able to translate that material and make it accessible to people who are not visual, in his case because he's blind. But it also opened my eyes, if you will, to the notion that maybe there are some people in the room that, though they can see, visual learning isn't working for them anyway. I also learned from him some things that if I had just contacted my local disabilities officer, I might have been more aware of. And that is that if you scan a document in PDF and put it on the web, their reader might not be able to read it. So that, he had technology that could read documents, but since I was scanning the document as a picture, even though it was letters, the reader couldn't read it very effectively. And so I had to rethink about just a simple thing like that. So just don't make this mistake. Don't learn from this by mistake. Think about it ahead of time, because it feels so awful when you make this mistake to disenfranchise students in your class. Here's a big one that I'm kind of still trying to learn, particularly from Callie offering, is presuming that the score isn't important. It's not important whether they win or lose. It's learning to play the game. We say this to students when we're teaching them in the first year. I don't care whether you say this argument will win or lose. That's not what's important. I want you to be able to see the arguments. I want you to be able to make the arguments. I want you to be able to unpack the law. The conclusion, that's the least important thing. Well, I tend to have a little bit of, my childhood hippiedom in me that says, the score, it doesn't really matter. It's playing the game, that's what we ought to be, that's what we're going to learn. And then I have students who come to me and say, I hated that Cali exercise. Well, why? I only got a 40%. Okay. But did you learn? Well, yes. But it took me 3 times through that exercise before I could get 100% on it. Or worse yet, this is what really taught. I went through it 3 times, I couldn't get it 100%. Why? Because I hadn't paid careful enough attention. I see Deb shaking her head. She knows. I hadn't paid careful enough attention to the scoring system on the Cali lesson. So I don't want Cali lessons to be simply rote learning of clear doctrinal lines. I want it to help students to see where some of the gray is, and so present some kind of open textured questions where we can branch off and why do you think that might be true, or why do you think this might be true, and help them really explore that. But if I'm not real careful and I don't not just turn off scoring when there isn't a right answer, but tell the students that might be the answer, but because this is an open question, I'm not going to score this question. And then they don't feel like they are being judged. And some of the humanizing legal education research has revealed some important differences between law students and the general public. And probably one of the most, for me, important and interesting things about law students is that they come into law school. One of the differences between law students and the general public is that they are more oriented toward external reference in measures of self. They're gold star kids. They're used to getting external feedback on their accomplishment, on their learning, on their value, on their worth, and they internalize that in a very, very significant degree. So if a law student gets a D, it's more than just I performed badly on that paper. It becomes I'm a D student. And so scoring is very important to their whole psyche. And so we have to pay very close attention if we're writing interactive lessons or using other technological systems that get feedback. You got to make a game that they can win, that they can have mastery, or they will be very angry and very frustrated. And then they're not going to play anymore. Because we might not be able to say you can't play, but they sure as heck can say I'm not going to play because this is too frustrating, this is too hurtful. Now that doesn't mean that you have to set up learning so that they don't make mistakes. But it does mean that they shouldn't have to cycle through too many times before they can begin to get some mastery. And it certainly means that any scoring that you use should be transparent and equitable, and they should feel as though it is fair game. Those of us who really like technology sometimes make this mistake. We forget the point of the game. When my son was about 3 years old, I think, 4 years old, we went to a Royals game, and it was his first baseball game. And we sat behind home plate, had these great seats that some friends of ours had given us, so we really could see the action. And I witnessed the most astounding inning of baseball that I think I've ever seen. The batter, I don't even remember who it was. I know they were playing the Detroit Tigers. I don't remember who the individual players were. But the batter got up, and he hit a foul ball. And then he hit another foul ball. Then he hit another foul ball. And then he hit another. He must have hit 10 or 12 foul balls in a row. Well, Danny was sitting there with this big grin on his face. Baseball's fun, because this guy's, the ball's getting thrown, and he's hitting it, and it's going all kinds of places, and it's very exciting. Everybody else in the stadium is ready to go down and rip the pitcher's head off because he can't seem to throw a ball that will either strike the guy out or, or that the guy will hit for good. Because it was like, there was a point at which you thought, how long can this possibly go on? The batter was getting totally exhausted. Danny was thrilled. The point of the game for the 3-year-old was, the ball gets thrown, the ball gets hit, we're all happy. Sometimes we're a little like Danny at a baseball game. You know, the technology is fun and it's working well and it's new and it's exciting and we've engaged the students and we've forgotten what the point was. We've forgotten the point of the game. I'm on I guess I could call it a crusade for faculty to really increase their appreciation of outcomes and assessment. To understand that having a destination in mind means that all the students are going to be able to travel the road more effectively, that more of them will get to the destination with you, that they will take fewer detours, that they'll be able to get to that destination on their own in the future if you know what the destination is and if you communicate it to the students. So clear learning outcomes, not what am I going to teach, but what are they going to learn as the starting point for anything that we do in a law school can absolutely transform legal education. If we know in clear and concrete and measurable terms what we want students to learn, that's going to affect the way we design all of our delivery of legal education. And then, if we take the additional courageous step of finding out whether they're actually learning it, of measuring those outcomes, and of using that data to change the way we teach and learn, then we really have transformed legal education. Now, what does that have to do with the Cali Conference? Assessment is very difficult, and it can be very time-consuming. It's not grading. That's bad enough. In fact, if anything, assessment makes grading a little more, you actually feel like you have a reason for doing it, besides just stamping letters on people's foreheads. Because you learn so much when you really take the time to identify not just how are the students doing A, B, C, or D, but what are they learning well? What are they learning poorly? What kinds of misunderstandings continue to crop up year after year after year? And what am I going to do about that? How do I turn my teaching and my materials and my activities around to change that? That can be really, really powerful stuff, even when you're just, working through your blue books and figuring out that from your blue books. But lots of assessment means lots of time. Designing the assessments, gathering the data, and analyzing the data. If the assessments can be designed and the data can be gathered more efficiently, then we can spend more of our time on what's really the most powerful part of assessment, and that's using the data of student learning. Think about it. If all you had to do, rather than write exams and grade exams, was just use the results of the exams to improve your next semester's teaching, technology can allow us to do some of that. Technology has the capabilities to share assessments, to efficiently gather data, to put it into formats that we can use to analyze our students' learning so that we can improve our teaching in very, very powerful ways. Cali Lessons, we know, is one really good source for the students. They use it. They love it. Why do they love Cali Lessons? Because it gives them self-assessment. Oh, I got that one. Oh, this one I don't know so well. And so if for them, they understand how powerful that is. Assessment is the single most powerful driver of education. And so they use it, but we can gather that data too. You know, you use, instead of just saying, go use the Cali lesson, you use a lesson link, and then you take the data from the students that says, oh, they didn't, a whole bunch of them didn't get this question right. We're gonna have to take class time to go over that. We need to take class time to develop that. So that, I think, is a very, very important role for technology going forward, in making that, in correcting that mistake of forgetting what it is that we're about, which is about student learning, as opposed to our teaching. Now, that was 9 innings of bad baseball. I haven't exhausted all my mistakes, though. So I just want to give you one more mistake that I've made, and that I've seen a lot of faculty make these days. And that's thinking that extra innings improve the game. I have a colleague, one of our adjunct faculty members, very devoted, puts in a lot of time on his teaching. Teaches large required course, upper level course. And he'd been hearing about this flipped learning, flipping the classroom thing. Now he's a practicing attorney. He's not a full-time academic. This is just what he picked up, you know, in the New York Times and such. So he's gonna flip the classroom. So we were meeting this year after for him. He said, you know, I tried something different this semester. I tried flipping the classroom. And as he described it to me, it suddenly made it very clear to me why someone who had been getting teaching evaluations that were stellar semester after semester after semester suddenly has students ready to burn him in effigy on the front lawn. His notion of teaching, flipping the classroom meant, I'll record usually they come to class, they've done the reading, they've prepared some problems, and I kind of lecture, go over those problems, review them. Well, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have do the reading, prepare the problems, I'm going to record the lecture, they're going to watch the lecture, then I'm going to give them a whole set of more problems that are much more sophisticated that we haven't been able to get to in the past. They're going to prepare those problems, they're going to come to class, and we'll go over those problems in class. That was flipping the classroom in his mind, is that the lecture portion was going. Instead, what he'd done was he'd taken what was already a very demanding class, where students were spending probably at least 3 hours of class preparation for every hour of class time, into something that was like 6 or 7 hours of class preparation that would have been necessary for every hour of class time. And I don't know about you, but I noticed something peculiar about students. If you assign 30 pages of reading, and they think that that's reasonable, they will, for 85 or 90% of them, read 30 pages of reading. If you assign 40 pages of reading, and they think that's unreasonable, they won't read 30 of the 40 pages. They won't read any of it at all. And so that's really kind of the phenomenon that he had, was that he had so overloaded them, and they didn't know where to cut, and they couldn't do it all. They physically could not do it all and meet all the other demands of their learning and their life. And so many of them just said, I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything at all. I just got the outline from an upper level student and said prayer. So it's true that good teaching emphasizes time on task and has high expectations, and I'm not suggesting that we should lower that. But good teaching also demands that we respect our students and the multiple competing demands that they have. Technology, in an age of information overload, in an age in which we can deliver so much content and so much instruction outside of the classroom, can threaten a situation in which students can't possibly meet the demands that we are making upon them. And so we'll have a real hard time deciding for themselves, which shouldn't be their job, which of those demands are reasonable and which ones are not. And so we have to be very, very thoughtful about that and not exhaust our players if we're going to have a winning game. I wanted to leave some time for you all to share your mistakes that maybe you've made or that you've learned from watching others, or talk about any of my mistakes that you'd like to gloat over a little more thoroughly because you have a better solution. Deb?
I just have the solution for your third resource. It's Ron Brown, Nova Southeastern. We were all at a conference with him when he mentioned that.
Is that who it was?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
excellent, wonderful. Now I know who to attribute that
There
to.
you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So, yeah.
Mine's a lot less interesting, but I wanted to say something in defense of, because of the failure of me, requiring something rather than just explaining how good it is. And it was in the process of trying to get students to post and comment on one another's posts in an online component of a regular class. I explained, and I thought I did a reasonably good job about, this will help you, blah, blah, blah. And they basically didn't do it. But when I was dictatorial and said, you must put up X number of original posts and twice that number of substantive comments, not just a yeah, I like this or no, this thing's on other students' posts, they did it. And I think they ultimately saw the value in it, but boy, saying that they had to do it pushed them over their reluctance to start, and that's what I do now, for what it's worth.
And do you find that they actually comment more than you require?
Oh yeah, it's like getting used to something that you originally did. Jumping into the cold water. Once they jump into the cold water and they are in it for a little bit, they find it's fine. But I have to push them.
Yes. Yeah, I've experienced the same thing with assigning Cali lessons. In the past, I've said, here's a wonderful resource, you can use it. Some of them do, some of them don't, but most don't, because it's just that one more thing for them to do, and they just, unless you tell them it's important enough to make me do it, optional reading, optional learning is not something that you're going to get more than 2 or 3 students engaging in a whole lot. But if you just assign it once and they realize the power of the tool, my experience is then that a whole lot more of them do use it. Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah.
I was so excited about Twen when it started. And I devised all these things for students to post and me to give feedback on Twen. So much so I won a contest from West. Most innovative use of Twen. Problem was students wouldn't do it. They absolutely wouldn't do it. And I have for years consistently been trying to find ways to get them to post solutions to problems for my feedback. I mean, individually tailored feedback, mind you. Prizes. I mean, I've given prizes, some of them worth $100 or more. Still, the people who would do it anyway are the ones who do it.
Yeah.
And the rest of the class won't. I finally, since I started doing an online blended class, developed quizzes for the problems that I previously had asked them to post solutions for. And these quizzes count towards their grade. And they're instantaneously graded. And I can track them and see who's doing what. Now, of course, everybody's participating. And I've now taken the quiz approach into my non-blended class, which the blended class has a handful of students. The regular class has, 60, 80, whatever. And I've found that the students who are taking the quizzes, and there's quizzes from virtually every topic, are doing much better. And the feedback I've gotten is that they actually appreciate it because they're getting feedback from me on a regular basis through the graded quizzes.
And when you say you use the quizzes, I'd like to unpack this a little bit because I think there's some important lessons here. Are you giving them quizzes over the problems that you post for them to ask for? So you give them a little
I
essay?
stopped posting the
Okay.
problems. They're in the casebook. I say to them, you should be working on these problems. I don't tell them they're gonna be quizzed on it.
Ah, okay.
But after the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quizzes, they see, oh, these are the problems that are in the book. So maybe I ought to pay attention to it if I want to get a better grade on the quiz. So that's what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit of this, you gotta make them do it to get them
Yeah.
started. It's a little bit of this, their external preference so that they get some feedback. I usually, in almost all my classes, have 10% of the grade that's based on these other kinds of learning activities that I think of as just formative assessments. They don't have to be graded to be formative assessment, but because our students are so oriented toward that grading function, we've
Right.
trained them way, way too well in American education. And so, but 10% of the grade never, it's 2 or 3 students ever that it makes a big difference on. And it makes a big difference in the cases when I would want it to. When some student has worked really, really hard and they've done really well enough, and then something blows their, their watch stops or something in the final exam, and so they get a lower grade than they would have, and it might help to inch them up because it's an outlier, and so it'll have an effect statistically.
But they think that it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, no, even the students, it's so funny, it's another one of those ways in which they know, but it doesn't stop them from acting on their, as though they didn't. They know that 10% won't make a difference if they have any statistical sense at all, but it doesn't matter. It's,
I have 2 errors I've made. One is, if you make them, and I actually learned this from my colleague, I'm Doctor, if you make a 10-minute video, you think it takes them 10 minutes to watch it. But if they're really watching it, they're gonna stop and replay it. So you're actually assigning them about 30 minutes of work, even though you think you're assigning them the 10 minutes it takes to watch it. So that was an overall
that's-
error I made.
that's fine.
You think, oh, they just have to watch this 5-minute video. It takes them 20 minutes.
What kind of video is it?
It's a little bit of the flipping. It's usually introducing them to a difficult concept. So we teach civil procedure. So rather than, it doesn't matter how many times they read about Erie, they're not going to come into the classroom understanding it. So you just flip a little intro to Erie so that they have a sort of common level when they walk into the classroom. You know you've at least brought them to here collectively. And I think of it, oh, it's just a 5-minute video telling them, hey, this is what Erie's about.
So it's a lecture,
Yes.
PowerPoint or something like that?
Yes, pretty simple and
It's
straightforward.
not a factual scenario? that they
No,
have to-
no, it's just a sort of intro section to this concept, but they're gonna play it a couple of times or stop it, and so I didn't realize that.
It's maybe because they want to hear your voice so
And secondly, the other thing I learned is I do quizzes as part of assessment, and they are so trained to try and keep their score up and monitor their assessment score. You have to have a mechanism for them to object to a question, or they get really upset. And I had made it anonymous grading, so my registrar probably is not talking to me, because what we ended up doing was they had to email the registrar to say, for instance, they'd email and they'd say, I accidentally misclicked on question 3. I knew what the answer was, but I clicked it in, so please can I get credit for question 2? And you're like, it doesn't matter, this is 10% of your grades, and this is what it's because. But you can't say that. So I do think that if you're going to do it for assessment, they take it very seriously. So you have to have a mechanism for them to be able, or they want to tell you why a question's unfair.
Yes.
They want to say this question was unfair because when you said this word, it was ambiguous. And I think you have to give them a mechanism to do that, or they really start resenting it as being unfair and tricky and evil.
It also emphasizes how much, we know that education is a social process, and that we construct education, we construct our knowledge often as a social process. And we're part of that community, and we will, no matter how much technology will help us, there's still some of it that is, there's just no being able to get, No replacement for being able to get in your professor's face and say, I teach using team-based learning primarily in my classes. And that methodology requires that every unit begins with the students take an individual quiz, and then as a team, they take the exact same quiz. And then the third step is they can appeal. A team can appeal a wrong answer. I've never seen a device that promotes group cohesion quite so quickly or effectively as having a team of students be able to take on the professor and win. So on the first quiz, I always have one question where one of the answers that's wrong can be successfully appealed. If they use their textbook and cite the materials and really work through it again, they feel so powerful when they have proven me wrong on a quiz answer. And it does not undermine my credibility, because with team-based learning, credibility has to be within the materials and the learning, not with me, because it's not an expert model of teaching.
Could you repeat that? They do it as an individual quiz, then they take it
As a group,
as a group, okay,
yeah, and then they appeal.
okay.
And we do that at the beginning of each unit to make sure that they have the basic vocabulary and things, so that they're all, and then we start working on problems and the like. If you want to learn more about it, just Google team-based learning. There's a whole methodology. There are conferences built around it. It's a world in and of itself. I'm happy to chat with anybody who wants to know more about that. It's another one of my little horses that I'm riding these days in education. Other mistakes? I know I'm not alone.
I think one of the mistakes I've made, and I'm not a professor on the tech side, one of my worst mistakes, which is finding a balance, is telling the truth. I usually like my users to know why we do certain things, or just how a system operates, or, not to overwhelm them, but just so that you know what's going on. And then there was the time that I let the faculty know that apparently something existed that they didn't know existed, and because they didn't know it existed, that was taken away because no one was using it. But then the fact that has suddenly disappeared, and apparently they had access to it at one point, everyone got so mad. So of course it had to be brought back, and guess who's using it? No one. So now it's like, okay, we're going to keep that kind of info to ourselves, as terrible as it seems to be, like we're holding secrets, but it just adds additional work or additional frustration, for the users, or they'll be like, well, then now I'm going to use it so you don't take away my freedom, and it's like, well, and then they just move on to the next thing. So that was a mistake that I have made, sadly, repeatedly, because I'm like, but I'm learning. It's an interesting one.
A need to know. There's a need to know imperative in your biz.
Exactly.
Our students operate on need to know, that's
Yes.
for sure. They always want to know, why do I need to know this? I have to say that I think my own experience with my students has been in that if I told them that I had been thinking about assigning them a particular assignment or giving them an additional learning tool, but I decided against it, would not be that they would rise in uproar and that they have that, but I don't know, maybe not. It depends. I suppose it depends on what it is. Yeah.
Speaking of the need to know, I am very new to teaching. I was just hired last year, so I've taught 4 lectures in legal research. And our school has a legal research and writing program. So the librarians, we just get 4 lectures, and the rest of it is all emphasized in writing, which I agree with, but that's okay. We'll let that go.
We can have that discussion over dinner.
Yeah. And so I get about 40 minutes 4 times during the year to teach legal research, which is not enough time to teach even any kind of rudimentary legal research. So they're all kind of frustrated by it. We get the same, everybody gets the same feedback, and so I get really nice ones because I bring cookies to butter them up. I don't think my colleagues appreciate that I do that because they don't bring cookies, but I do. It's just the way I am. So anyway, so the way that it works, though, because the writing professors really run the program, is that they have some client file they've given to their students, and then, and I'm sure this is probably how a lot of legal research and writing programs are, and then we're jumping in to teach them about the statutes that they're going to have to research for this client file, and then a week later we'll do the cases, and then the next semester we have them for a new client file where they're going to have to use secondary sources, and we split that into 2 lectures. So, because they have an assignment that's associated with my lecture, I've been teaching it, well, the 1 year that I've taught it, my strategy is to use that assignment and
Yeah, collaboration.
just
build
stick
on
to
each
exactly
other.
what they need to learn. But the problem that I found is, and I got very positive feedback from my students. They loved it. I was very direct. My professor loved it because students knew exactly what they needed to do. But they only knew how to do it for that client file. So they got the next client file for the fall semester, and they were going to have to do statutes and cases again. And they would come to me and they go, okay, now how do I do it for this one? And I'm like, oh, we just went over this. It's just a different case. You just need to look up different keywords, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think there's not a lot of flexibility that we get because it's so heavy-handed by the writing professors. But I think if nothing else, I'm going to keep reminding them throughout my lectures this next semester that this is how you would do this for any legal research problem, you know, not just this client file, because it didn't occur to me how tunnel vision they were about this one particular client file. So that was a real wake-up
Transference
for
of
me.
learning in any
Yeah.
educational setting is a huge, huge challenge.
Mhm.
And legal education, it's not any different. You know, I teach the upper level students in professional responsibility. They've all had business organizations from really talented teachers. I ask them, what is a fiduciary relationship? Oh, we haven't studied that. We don't know what agency, what is that? You know, and you know that's not true. You know that they have been taught that. You know that they've been tested on it. The transference is just really hard, and you know, into a different model. Well, our time is up, but thank you for this conversation. I hope that at least one or two of my mistakes help you to improve your teaching and learning down the road.
Oh, you can certainly can. Yeah, yeah. My colleague on church is presenting tomorrow, and she doesn't want to work, and that's one of the things. Yeah.
I should have turned to YouTube.
Yeah, she wants to come to Ohio.
Okay.
Columbus, Ohio, that's also Ohio.
Okay, so that's.
One of the mistakes that I still think
It's for us.
yeah, is that I use copyrighted material. You know?
I've never heard the story about the sexual.
I went to that one, I probably did this later about, what is this?
Good, I'm glad.
You know, fun it is.
Alright, so,
Exactly, exactly, and that's why I think what it makes sense, and that I don't,
Yeah.
support,
twenty after.
I really think, I'm
Cool.
thinking about
Okay.
the only thing I'm doing is like support stuff, which I don't know.
Well, I didn't know, you know,
But I
a lot of
want
it's
to always have that content,
old stuff.
but civil procedures. Right.
Oh, I'm still
right.
alive, yeah.
So,
You know, but some of these.
Capital Law School, Columbia. You?
I teach torts in St. Croix, and I'm gonna do the law.
That's right.
Boys.
That's why I said that. Because we were still alive.